there, math analyzers. Here is your chapter 6, lesson 1 through 5 review practice. Now, I'm just going to do a couple questions in each section for you. Of course, there's always more questions in the review than on the actual quiz, but this is the best way to help prep you for that quiz, right? So I'm just going to do questions in each section, fill in the other ones as you go, finish them up, practice them, judge them against my answer key. Ask me if you have any questions before you take the quiz. Okay? So I'll go with number 4 here, where we've got h squared minus 2h equals 15. And we need to solve by factoring. So let's subtract that 15 over, because we need standard form of our quadratic equation. And let's see here. Okay, now what are the factors of negative 15 that will subtract to give me a negative 2 in the middle? And that would be 5 and 3. So h is in the front, 5 and 3 in the backs. The bigger factor always has to have the same sign as the middle, so that makes this 5 negative. And because the n term is negative, these signs have to be different. That would make this 3 positive. NIT chart. H minus 5 equals 0, so h equals 5. And h plus 3 equals 0, so h equals negative 3. My answers, negative 3 and 5 in my French curly braces, right? What if you have something like number 6, still in the solve by factoring section, still needs standard form, so I'm going to add this 4x squared and subtract this 1. So plus 4x, my bad. And then this minus 1 here, 21x squared plus 4x minus 1 equals 0, because you got to have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right, well now, this is 5-line method, right? The only thing about it this time where I'm not going to use my 5 lines is that my n term is 1. So I actually only have to think about what my front numbers are going to be, the stuff that multiplies together to give me 21. And that would be 21 and 1 and 7 and 3. Well, is there a way we can make 7 and 3 subtract to give me 4x when there's only 1s in the back? Sure, if these 1s have opposite signs. So you have 7x here and 3x here, right? Then we've got, oh, I did it backwards. I'm sorry. This should be positive and this should be negative. And the reason I say that is because the 3x needs to be the minus and the 7x needs to be the plus. So, right, we get positive 7x minus 3x when we do this outer and inner. And that gives me the positive 4x in the middle. Then, of course, the 1s being opposite signs gives me the 1 as a negative at the end. There we have it. Now, of course, because we've got a coefficient in front of the x, when we set these equal to 0, we are going to get fractional answers, still rational answers. I would leave them in fraction form. Divide both sides by 7, right? There you go. So you get x equals 1/7 on this side. And over here, we get 3x equals negative 1. Divide both sides by 3. So I get x equals negative 1/3. And those are my 2 answers. Sorry, I didn't leave a whole ton of room to get that part done. These guys are solved by square roots. So I'm going to do what I think would be the more complicated one, which is number 7. You need to get x squared alone if you solve by square roots. So subtract 12 from both sides. You get 5x squared equals, oh, what's that, 7? Then divide both sides by 5. Oh, yeah, this one's more complicated. You get x squared equals 7 over 5. So you have to take the square root of both sides. Now, neither 5 nor 7 are perfect squares. So we also have to rationalize this because we've got a radical in the denominator. So I get x equals plus n minus radical 7 over radical 5. Now we multiply top and bottom by radical 5. And we get x equals plus n minus. Well, we know that there's only a 5 on the bottom because a radical times itself. The radical cancels out. The radicand remains. That's the whole point of multiplying top and bottom by it. Then here, radical 7 times radical 5 is radical 35, which is not evenly divisible by any perfect squares. So that's it. Plus and minus radical 35 over 5 is your final answer. When taking the square roots, always get that x squared alone first. Okay, C term, finding the C term. Take the middle term, divide it by 2, and square it. If your middle term is even, then this will be easy, right? 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 squared is 64. If your middle term is odd, you just square the top and put it over 4 because you are still taking this number and dividing it by 2 and then squaring it. But 2 squared is always going to be 4 for the bottom. So you always know the bottom is going to be 4. So really just square that top, you get 81. Remember, the C term is always positive no matter what. So since that's the case, you know that you don't have to worry about this negative here because negative 9 squared is still positive 81. Continuing, if we were finding C terms here, that means we must be completing the square soon. So I will complete the square on, let's see, let's do number, I did not put anything like these down here on the quiz. So let's do number 11 because I have an even number as my B term. So the first thing I want to do is add 23 to both sides of the equal sign. I leave a plus blank where the number used to be, and I insert a plus blank on the other side of the equal sign. This is where I use that finding the C term process we just did to fill in the blanks. So let's see, I've got 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9 that goes on the blanks. Notice again, I know it was a negative 6 in the middle, right? But I know that negative times negative is going to give me a positive number to both sides. That's why it's always plus for this. Now on this side, of course, this factors into two binomials that will end up being exactly the same two binomials. They are x minus 3 and x minus 3, okay? Here, you add up these two numbers, you get 32. Okay, so I'm going to write this as one binomial squared. X minus 3 squared equals 32. And that's exactly where we need to be because now the opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. So I can take the square roots of both sides. Over here, just x minus 3 comes out because the square and the square root cancel each other out. On this side, with the radical 32, we have to put a plus and minus in front of the radical. And if a radical is simplifiable, you have to do it. Well, 32 is evenly divisible by a couple of perfect squares, 4 and 16. 16 being the biggest one is the wisest one to use. And what's the square root of 16? 4. 32 divided by 16 gives you the leftover under the radical. That would be 2. Now, add that 3 over. And when you add that 3 over away from the x, it always, this number you add over or subtract over, always goes in front of the plus or minus, okay? Because this plus or minus might not be a rational number, and ours isn't. This is not a rational number. So since this is rational and this is not, they cannot combine any further by adding and subtracting, okay? So since they can't combine any further by adding and subtracting, I leave this as the two answers, 3 plus 4 radical 2 and 3 minus 4 radical 2. Those are the two answers for that. Okay. Quadratic formula, of course, all it is, right? X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Just try to write it without singing it. You can't do it. I was trying to speak it, right? It didn't happen. You could hear it. You could hear the song in my voice. Now let's use the quadratic formula. Make sure you have standard form first. So I have to first, doesn't matter which of these I move. I don't need to keep x squared positive, but I like to. I'm used to doing it that way. So I'm going to subtract the 10x over and add the 5 over. So I rewrite getting standard form equals 0. And then I know my a is 3, my b is negative 10, and my C is positive 5. And that's what I plug into the quadratic formula. Why am I starting to write the quadratic formula incorrectly? There we go. Rewrite it so that make sure you memorize it and you're plugging in correctly. And I get the negative of negative 10 plus or minus the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5, and all divided by 2 times 3. Okay, so negative times negative is a positive, right? And then, oh, yeah, that's right. I told you guys to come over to your graphing calculator here and plug in. So let's do that. It's the square of negative 10. So I know this is going to be a positive in front, right? Minus 4 times 3 times 5. So we're multiplying all this together and we get 40. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. It's 100 minus 60. Yep. So we've got radical 40 right here, all divided by 6. 2 times 3 is 6. Now 40 is evenly divisible by a perfect square. It's evenly divisible by 4. So let's see here. I get 10 plus or minus, let's see, the square root of 4 is 2. And 40 divided by 4 is 10. So radical 10 is my leftover, all divided by 6. Now I look at my coefficients. I like to refer to it as the triangle of coefficients. They are all even numbers, so they can all divide evenly by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm not even going to write the 1. I'm just going to bring down my radical 10. And on the bottom, 6 divided by 2 is 3. That is my final answer. 5 plus and minus radical 10 over 3. That is, of course, two answers. 5 plus radical 10 all over 3, and 5 minus radical 10 all over 3. Now, when I say down here you can use any method to solve the quadratic equation, I mean pick wisely. Pick wisely. If you see an odd number as your x term here, and you know you don't like to do that with completing the square because it's going to give you a fraction as your c term, then don't do completing the square. Do quadratic formula, see if it's factorable, right? Same here. Do quadratic formula, see if it's factorable. I would probably go with quadratic formula for the any method questions because we know that quadratic formula and completing the square always work. Those would be my defaults. Anyway, that's it. That's it, guys. Getting you ready for your quiz. You finish those up, check your answers against my answer key here, but those are the types of questions that I asked you in your quiz. It is a Google form, so you will have to show all your work on a separate sheet of paper and upload it at the end of the quiz. Okay, so I did it instead of in each question, there's an upload at the end for all of your work. So if there's something you got wrong, I can see immediately whether you should have your partial credit and how much. And that's the way we'll go. Okay. Good luck. I'm sure you don't need it, but I bequeath it to you anyway. And I shall be seeing you guys soon for discriminant stuff. So we're in the middle third of chapter 6 now. Very exciting. All fun stuff in chapter 6. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.